The Internet of Things is about everything being connected. So I want you to think for a second. Take a smartphone out, take a tablet out. It's about anything that has current running through it being connected. It's about everything in your life being smarter. Now, I've said this a lot, and some people don't like when I say it, but devices that are connected are smart. Devices that are not connected are dumb. It's that simple, right? And they're all going to make your life better. It's also not about these devices just utilizing the wide area wireless network. You think from us being AT&T, we would understand that we obviously want them on that network. We also understand it's going to use a multitude of protocols, whether Zigbee, Z-Wave, 433, along with LTE, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth, as you all would expect. It's also about a wide variety of devices. We talk a lot about consumer devices. It's also about industrial devices. Wearables, smartwatches, right? Jet engines, smart cities, street lights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The question that's out there, though, is how big is this really? Right? A lot of people have a lot of opinions about IoT, about what it's really going to be. Now, as you can probably see behind me, there's lots of numbers coming up. And no matter what forecasts you see, they're all big. In fact, they're all huge, right? We're talking about billions of devices. We're talking about trillions of dollars of value and these huge numbers in this ecosystem and massive opportunity. Also, there's some skepticism about IoT, and there's lots of questions that need to be answered. How are we going to monetize IoT, right? Who are the big winners going to be? Is it the carriers? Is it the OEMs? Who's going to play the biggest in this? I would also say, what about security, right? Are these devices going to be secure if you're in my car, in my home, and in my whole life? I would also ask, and maybe the most important, is what about the customer experience, right? Are we going to have one experience, multiple experiences? How do we make this simple for our customers? And this is where many of you in this room come in, because IoT opens up a massive opportunity for the developer community, which is why many of you are here and many of you got an opportunity to do some really fun stuff over the last few days around this ecosystem. I've invited a few of our industry leaders from this ecosystem to help me answer some of these questions and have a conversation. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the following panelists. Steve Mollenkopf from Qualcomm. Benedict Evans from Andreessen Horowitz. Alex Hawkinson from SmartThings. And last but certainly not least, Padma Warrior from Cisco Systems. All right, good morning.
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 Thank you guys all so much for being here. So we're going to start here. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, briefly talk about what you do, and talk about your company and how it fits in the ecosystem. And Steve, let's start with you.
Okay, so I'm Steve Mollenkopf, the CEO of Qualcomm. We actually view ourselves as an enabler, both a technology enabler and I think a company that tries to make it easy for people to use technology that's becoming more and more complex. And we've obviously been well known for our positioning and our products in mobile. And we think that's a good place to actually springboard and to use the same basic business strategy to make it easy for people to get onto the Internet of everything. And it's a very, very complex world that we're moving to, and I think it's going to require a lot of different technologies and making it easy for people to develop using those technologies. And so that's very similar to what we did in the smartphone space, and we think that's a good baseline for us to go into the Internet of Everything. So it's we kind of view ourselves as an enabler.
Very good. Thanks, Steve. All right, Benedict.
I'm Benedict Evans. I'm a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a software venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. Where do we sit in the ecosystem? We invest in great entrepreneurs who are creating great companies, and we try and help them, and we try and partner with them to help them grow. I think Internet of Things is part of this great explosion in opportunity that's coming from mobility and from software at the moment that means the whole opportunity set for entrepreneurs becomes an order of magnitude bigger than it was in the PC internet. And part of that is smartphones, part of that is cloud services, part of that is Internet of Things.
That's great. Plus Martha Stewart likes you, so this is good.
Well, yeah, my mother's pleased with that.
All right, Alex.
I guess Smart Things, we're trying to make it very easy and accessible for everyday people to turn their homes into smart homes. But then more broadly, we're trying to be the leading sort of open platform for this. And so I guess I see one of our roles in the industry, I think, is both to be an open platform that really embraces developers and device makers, but also to drive that in a really true sense. You know, we see a lot of sort of semi-walled gardens that are going up, and I think it's really important at the networking enabling technology level, at the device level, at the developer skill set level to really be open top to bottom.
That's great. Thank you. Padma.
I'm Padma Shri Warrior. I'm the Chief Technology and Chief Strategy Officer for Cisco. So, our view is Internet of Things is really the next evolution of the Internet. If you kind of think about the Internet, it went from a communication platform to a commerce platform to a social interaction platform in the last several decades. And this next evolution really is for the Internet to become a platform to connect, process data, things, and people. So I think our role from a Cisco point of view is twofold. Firstly, in this evolution, the technology architecture is going to go from how we had evolved from client server to mobile cloud to the next evolution, which is distributed intelligence that we call compute, storage, network, and analytics at the edge, where devices connect from the home and other places. From a business opportunity point of view, it's really to help to become an enabler to help our customers and partners like AT&T to leverage this transition.
Great. Thank you. All right, now I'm going to go into some tough questions. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Markoff. So right now, most connected devices are part of a limited ecosystem, one or two devices, maybe with an app. As IoT matures, let's call it maybe in the home or car, will devices communicate all the way back to the server or back to the cloud? Or do you think there'll be local ecosystems for those devices to work with in multiple protocols?
Well, I would say it's the great thing about the Internet of Everything is that there's really no sort of unifying trend, actually. That's one of the problems, actually, that we face, I think, as a company, is how do we make it easy for people to do things, but also deal with the fact that it's very, very diverse. And I think that extends also to what's going to happen to the Internet. And just to kind of build on what Padma was saying, we think the most interesting things that are going to happen to the Internet are going to happen at the edge of the Internet. And in some use cases, you'll see data that won't move very far away from where it's actually originated. I think it's all going to be connected to the cloud in some way, but the bandwidth that it uses to go back or the frequency that it goes back may be different depending on different use cases. And those use cases can move with a person or a device or what have you. I think it's going to be a lot of complexity in order to do that. Now, for us, what we think is interesting is all of those use cases are some mix of computing, some mix of connectivity, some mix of graphics, some mix of security. And getting that right and specific to the individual application will be a lot of what companies like us try to do and make that very easy for developers. And forums like this are actually very, very good opportunities for us to learn what we need to do to put into chipsets to make it easy. But it's going to be a very, very complicated world from a technology perspective behind what the developer is trying to do and what the applications are trying to work on.
Terrific. Thank you. Benedict. So IDC estimates 20% of the money spent on IoT will go towards software. What should the mobile app developers, and especially the ones in the room, focus on to prepare for this transition?
Gosh, what should they focus on? I think the way that I tend to come at this is that if you were to ask our grandparents how many electric motors they owned, they could probably have told you there's one in the car and one in the refrigerator, and maybe they had a dozen. And today, none of us would have any idea. There's probably a dozen motors in the wing mirror of your car today. And that's kind of what's going to happen with network connections. Just because the technology and the components become so cheap and so useful, they will just be everywhere. And so And then yet at the same time, those components are just kind of dumb endpoints without software, without a connection, without something doing something sensible with those. So the availability of all those components enables almost anything that you can think of to create as a software developer, but it will all be happening in software. The chips, the chip people will make great chips, but the thing that the end user will buy will be a use case or an experience or a set of recommendations or something that kind of contributes some value or be something that appears to them on a piece of glass. And so all of that will be powered by software. The chips by themselves are not something that a software developer can work with, but the chips will be everywhere, and so those enable all kinds of other things, from wearables to connected thermostats to anything else, and the software for all of those will look very different.
Very good. So you're saying that chips are kind of, you caught that, right, Steve?
Yeah. As you know, we ship a lot of software. Right?
Yeah. All right, Alex. The Consumer Electronics Association estimates only 10% of new homes in the U.S. will have home automation. What do you believe creates the inflection point for the adoption of home automation?
It's a good question. I mean, and a lot of big stakes in that around the table. I think it's three things that come to mind for me. One is just ease of use and general awareness of this stuff. I mean, most consumers don't realize. My in-laws have smartphones, but I don't know that they know that there's an app store on them, and so on. So there's a lot of things that need to be done for awareness, and I think companies like AT&T and Samsung and others are going to do a lot about that in the coming year. A second is, I think this consolidation of standards to some that are really truly open, as I was talking about. I think it's going to get in the way of the industry if consumers have to go in and they have to decide which walled garden they're a part of, or feel fear that if they buy something somewhere, it's not going to work, and give them some flexibility. And so I think it's very important. Initiatives like I'll Join and Thread and so on, and those are making a lot of progress. And then the third is really the developer community, honestly. I mean, we see it where I think things like smart homes and home automation are much more like home decorating than they are like one size fits all. And what we hear from our users is, of course, things like security are the top apps, but it's the remarkable app created by a developer that my grandma didn't take her medicine on time and I got a notification and that's really meaningful for me. Or it's the Barry White that comes on the Sonos speaker at the right moment, at home. If that's what strikes you, it depends on each individual user, and it's really the developer community that's creating that for our platform and we think for the world.
Yeah, that Barry White thing would be good for the developers out there. I think you could sell that.
It's always a laugh for myself. It never works, generally speaking.
Timing's off, right? Yeah, got it. All right, Padma. So an HP study found that 70% of the most commonly used IoT devices contain some security vulnerabilities. How will we address security as we enter the era of the Internet of Everything and everything being connected?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and security has actually become more front and center now, right? In the recent news, everything that's going on, it's gone from a hobbyist creating chaos to national threats. So I think several things will change in the security model if you think about Internet of Everything. If you think about security thus far, actually I would say even today, the agenda varies depending on which industry you're in. If you're a content provider, security means digital rights management. If you're a healthcare provider, it means providing user authentication. If you're an enterprise, it's network security. If you're a consumer internet company, it's DNS and DDoS attack. So the agenda varies, and if you think about Internet of Everything, all the examples that were discussed here, all of these things become all of our concerns, depending on, it doesn't matter which industry we're in, right? In the manufacturing industry, now you're going to have robots and sensors that suddenly can become surveillance vehicles. So I think it really has to become more of a platform versus an appliance or a firewall model, which is what it's been thus far. I think network forensics to predict what's happening with the data is going to be huge. Hopefully you guys and us will play a big role in that. I think the other thing that we'll see happening is privacy enhancing technology. So if you think about a use case like smart metering, how do you make sure that you're enhancing or anonymizing the data that's being collected so it's not attributed to a particular individual? So there's actually lots of startups. We just did, and there's an opportunity for developers actually. We did a hackathon for security startups, and so there'll be lots of privacy enhancing applications. Hopefully we'll see from people that are out here. and actually threat analysis based on the signature of the data we see. So there'll be lots of innovation in the security place as well. Think about security in the future perhaps being a platform that can dynamically integrate new solutions, which is thus far it's not been. So I think there'll be a big change in how we think about security and how we secure things.
Terrific. Thank you. You have something to add there, Steve?
Well, I was going to say, I couldn't agree more. I think you end up, the internet, as it moves out to the edge, actually becomes more personal. And the requirement, first of all, the requirements because of that are much higher. The other one is it just has so many more endpoints that I think by necessity, the architecture of the internet will have to change. Remember, the internet was really architected, a long time ago.
Right.
And as you move to taking data like medical data and very, very personal data, the requirements are going to be very different. I mean, extending the internet to your pocket and a smartphone is one thing, but actually measuring your heart rate, making a change based off of that heart rate really require big changes to the fundamental technology that's underneath of the internet. And security will be something that I think is going to be a huge element of innovation in the future. And I think it's really important that the big companies and we really do this right, or else we won't be able to take advantage of many of the the great ideas that people come up with and fund in the venture world.
Agreed.
I think just to build on that, right? We talked about actually all of us talked about distributed intelligence. Maybe to be controversial here, perhaps it's sort of like the reverse of the movement to cloud, right? When we talk about intelligence at the edge, analytics at the edge, security response at the edge. In security, for instance, most of the money thus far has been spent on how do you prevent an attack, and that's slowly changing because we are recognizing, you will be attacked. So how do you know when you're being attacked, and how do you remediate faster? So I think having these fast responses at the edge is also going to happen very quickly. So I think we'll sort of segregate from certain things being done in the cloud much more efficiently, but certain things are going to be much more efficient closer to the edge, closer to the sensors, real-time response, real-time analysis, real-time security.
Great. All right.
I was going to say, I think a big part of the security question, indeed the kind of the more general Internet of Things question, is where exactly does the intelligence sit? One of the obvious questions is if you've got a capital good, if you've got a washing machine or a TV or a car that gets replaced every 5 or every 10 or every 15 years, how much intelligence should be in that as opposed to in a smartphone or as opposed to in a cloud platform? And then more generally, how many of the dozens or hundreds of devices that you have in your home or in your office do you want to be smart enough to be attack vectors? And how many of those do you want to be basically dumb sensors that are connected to a smartphone or a cloud platform so that you can kind of minimize the attack surface and minimize the degree of complexity that the user has to deal with? There's a kind of a question as to when you say the Internet of Things, are we really talking about there's 150 devices in your home that you're going to admin? Right. Or are you actually saying, well, there's maybe 3 or 4 sort of systems that are going on? Maybe you've got a burglar alarm that has a dozen sensors, but that's actually kind of one thing from a security point of view.
Right. All right, so let's go with that for a second. Alex, I'll point this to you. How do we address the overall customer experience? All the stuff we're talking about is really cool, and we all like shiny objects, right? But the general consumer, how do we address the experience that we give them? How do we make it simple? How do we make it so this doesn't intimidate them? Alex?
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to sit astride, right? Making it very simple and then still keeping this idea of being open at the same time, because openness creates opportunities for complexity and diversification by nature. So I think it's going to be a lot of mechanisms to steward the right consumer experiences around this. Some of them are principles. Some of them are things like the certification program we've built, and I'm sure there's others that are going to be parallels to sort of look at developer innovation and testing for things like platform-level security adherence, privacy first principles, which I think would be a very interesting topic to get into outside of security, and a number of other things to sort of certify that things are ready to protect the best interests of the consumers before exposure. So a lot of these mechanisms need to be put in place that have existed in things like the app stores that haven't been there around the Internet of Things yet.
Okay. Any other? I know Steve's over there.
Well, I think for us, and we have hundreds of partners worldwide, and I think the thing that we've learned over the years is that if you can make it easy for people to experiment and innovate, you tend to get more out of the ecosystem by doing that than sort of this grand plan. If you make it super easy for people to do things, they'll figure out some way of doing it, which is much better than you would have. And I think if we can do that, the user experience part will sort of take care of itself.
I will. Sorry, just to add that it's also sort of hiding some of the technologies, right? Making these decisions, because there's a lot of these, like, again, is it threat or all, Jane? Take that as an example. It's like a consumer is just not going to care or know, and they shouldn't have to, right? These things should just work. So I know it's not in exposing, as developers and device makers, exposing consumers to the randomness on that front, right? We have to have consolidation around these core bits of getting something connected and it being reliable, secure, and so on.
I mean, to the point I made earlier about, electric motors. Our homes are full of electric motors, but you didn't go to Home Depot and buy a box of 45 electric motors and go home and say, now, how am I going to automate my home? You went out and you bought a refrigerator and you bought a blender and you bought a washing machine, and so you buy use cases. And some of those use cases need to stack together or talk to each other. Some of them just need to plug into the electricity. Some of them just need to plug into IP or plug into the network. Some of them don't even need to plug into the network. So you'll have a home electricity meter that's connected. It's not going to talk to the internet. Your burglar alarm is probably never going to touch the public internet, but it's going to be using all the standards and all the software that everyone in this room is working on. So you're going to have a whole bunch of different use cases and a whole bunch of kind of things that are connected to the internet.
So let me throw out one of the big issues, right? Billions of devices. God, that sounds great. There's going to be, whether they're Bluetooth or they're Zigbee, Z-Wave, et cetera. How do we make money? Right? How does the ecosystem monetize this? And the same front, I'd throw another question on there. What are people willing to pay for it? Right? They've got their broadband, their video, their smartphones. So talk a little bit about how does this whole monetization thing come together?
I think, consumers always pay for something that helps us do things better. And I think we may pay less for what is no longer of value, but we'll always pay for what's of value, right? And what is of value keeps changing as technology evolves, and we've kind of proven that. I think we used to pay for, processors before. Now we pay for apps, and the access technologies have to be hidden, and it's a value that comes out of it. So my view is that as we go to the Internet of Everything, we estimate that there is a lot of value still. We mostly think about IoT in the consumer space with wearables and Fitbits and things of this sort, but think about the industrial space. Think about robots, drones, heavy-duty Internet of Things. That's also Internet of Things.
Very much.
That space has not yet been exploited at all. So there's a lot of value we can create, and we will pay for better productivity in businesses, coming from the enterprise space. How do you make a business more efficient, giving analytics from all the sensors? We were talking about, what you're doing in the consumer space. How do you bring that into the enterprise space? Manufacturing efficiencies. There's lots of apps that can be written for that. We in Cisco call this the merger of IT and OT. So far, they've been very separate. And information technology, how does that blend with operations technology? There's a huge amount of value at that intersection.
I could just add a couple things there. Because we're so developer-centric as a platform, I think there's many layers. There's going to be a lot of winners in the space. It's going to be a very big market, obviously, overall. So clearly, enabling technologies like connectivity technology or security platform software or other things that'll be underneath it. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of retrofitting the physical world with connected versions of things that weren't connected before, and I think a lot of innovation opportunities to make new devices and sell that way. But then the big layers, I think, down, for probably this community are really in the connected apps and services. And that's both directly in things like this. I heard the I can't give away the hackathon.
No, don't do that.
But
in trouble.
Who the finalists are and otherwise. But is it the app that creates a better consumer experience around a specific use case, or is it the connected service that, in my case, like I started the company around a disaster in my house, would it be the connected plumbing home services company that just uses these technologies to make life better for me? I think there's disruption of home services markets and parallels in other industries. I think there's then finally disruption to sort of the way businesses work in industries like insurance right now that can affect basically a tax on society. Their value will go down as there's better knowledge about what's happening in the space from these technologies, and there's a chance to disrupt whole industries like that.
So what do you think, Benedict? And who's going to be the winner here?
Well, I think the winner will be the consumer, but there's going to be an enormous and very interesting set of kind of struggles and fights and layers of innovation and disruption and destruction going on top of that. who's going to win in the end? Well, we kind of won't notice this stuff anymore. You'll go home and the lights will turn on without you having to turn on the switch, and your thermostat will turn down when you leave the home because the burglar alarm told the thermostat that you'd left home. And you'll come home and Barry White will turn on the hi-fi, and the mood lighting will shift appropriately depending on who it is, because it looks at your diary and knows that you had a date in the diary that day. And not necessarily everybody will set all of this stuff up, just as home automation kind of. But not everybody set up their curtains to open automatically. But at the same time, we'll look back and we think, okay, wow, this just kind of happened. Yeah. If you were to tell your grandparents that you've got 4 different machines at home that can cut vegetables, they'd look at you like you were soft in the head or lazy or grotesquely decadent. But those same kind of use cases will just come because you'll go into the store and it will be there, and you think, yeah, that's kind of useful. And you won't have to think about all the incredible technology that's going on behind it. It will just work.
Steve?
Well, I mean, we really don't worry about it, quite frankly. We actually worry. We make big bets on technology, much like I know AT&T does. And if you can enable experimentation, the industry tends to take care of these things. But I think it'll be 2 trends. You'll have people that extend the business model that exists on mobile, for example, into a new area. And then I think you're going to just see whole new industries take connectivity which didn't use it before. And I would pick one. You talked about automotive, you talked about the home for a while. But healthcare is another area which really has not taken advantage of Moore's law on a daily basis. Obviously, in the hospital it has, but in terms of the way in which we manage ourselves, it's nothing like the way in which we manage our cars or any other device. And that's an enormous, enormous economic benefit that exists somewhere for someone to take advantage of. And so I think for us, it's less about will it happen. It's just sort of, can we make it easy for people to figure out how to do it?
Great. Well, let me thank you guys. Round of applause for a terrific panel. Thank you guys very much.